In the 16th century, the Europeans would sail to the Indian subcontinent in a race for riches, first seizing trade routes, then the land itself. By the 1800s, the British would control most of the subcontinent, exploiting India's wealth and ruling it as the crown jewel of their empire. But there were already thriving peoples here, with civilizations and history stretching back thousands of years. These empires were among the most powerful the world had ever seen, from humanity's most magnificent cities and monuments to some of the most peaceful and enlightened cultures in human history. The Indians were pioneers of knowledge, advancing mathematics, charting the movements of the planets, and offering the world unique philosophies. India withstood the ancient era, the Middle Ages, and now the modern period. With a rising population of over 1 billion people and increased tension from their neighbors, can they continue on? To understand this fascinating land, we must start from the beginning. For many scholars, it begins with a history of Adivasi. The Adivasi are the ancient native peoples of India who had lived on the subcontinent for anywhere up to 30,000 years. These tribes inhabited India as nomads and semi-nomad long before anyone else. They left behind very little archaeological evidence, and what history they have survived orally in their modern descendants. Then came the first major settled civilization in India, the Indus River Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley Civilization emerged in the late 4th millennium BC along the Indus River. They were one of the first great urban societies on the planet. But despite existing at the same time as other civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China, comparatively little is known about them. The Indus Valley Civilization was an urban culture that thrived along the river for about 2,000 years, reaching its height around 2600 BC and declining after 1900 BC. At one point, it might have been home to up to 5 million people, living in hundreds of cities and towns. Excavations at major sites like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, both of which are in modern-day Pakistan, show a complex urban culture with stone architecture, planned cities, and complex infrastructure. The Indus Valley Civilization relied on monsoon agriculture to feed themselves. And they also had a sewage system and public baths that would not be matched elsewhere in the world for over 1,000 years. Evidence shows that the Indus Valley Civilization was engaged in trade, with documents and seals used by merchants, along with settlement walls to control entry and exit to towns, suggesting a developed merchant culture. From their graves, we know that they believed in some sort of afterlife, and differences between the graves show some kind of wealth-based social hierarchy. However, we still cannot decipher the writings from this civilization. As a result, although we can now point to hundreds of Indus Valley Civilization sites, so much of their lives and society are lost to us. Despite all their achievements, we cannot even name a single person who lived in this civilization for its 2,000-year-long history. What caused the fall of the Indus Valley Civilization? Firstly, the Indus Valley Civilization didn't fall at a single decisive moment. It appears to have gradually petered out over centuries between about 1900 BC and 1300 BC. The most likely explanation is climate. After 1800 BC, the climate of the Indus region became cooler and drier, which affected the monsoons and made it harder to practice the agriculture needed for these large cities. Earthquakes also caused the course of the Indus River to shift westward over time, which deprived cities of their vital water source. Their cities declined, but the Indus Valley people themselves didn't necessarily die with them. Most scholars believe the Indus people migrated southeast deeper into the subcontinent. One theory holds that the Dravidian language family, which is spoken mostly in southeast India and includes Telugu, Tamil, and Kannada, originally came from these Indus Valley migrants. With the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization, a third group of people enter our story, and it's these people that most Indians see as their ancient predecessors, the Vedic peoples. The Vedic people appear to have hailed from Central Asia and began migrating into northwestern India in around 1500 BC. They called themselves Arya and are sometimes called the Indo-Aryans. Initially, they were nomadic peoples, but over time they settled in India in villages and small towns. By 1200 BC, the Vedic peoples had crossed the Ganges River and began penetrating deeper into central and eastern India. The Vedic people brought the domestication of the horse to India. First domesticated by Indo-European peoples around 2200 BC, horses served as pack animals to help in their migrations and pulled chariots which were characteristic of Vedic warfare. They also brought their own language in Vedic Sanskrit. The Vedas are a collection of dense, complicated, and beloved religious texts that are still in use today. There are 4 Vedas. The oldest, longest, and most well-known is the Rig Veda. There's also the Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. The Vedas were the earliest sacred texts of India, composed around 1500 BC, forming the foundation of Indian philosophy, ritual, and spiritual thought. As for what that society looked like, Vedic people began as semi-nomadic tribal pastoralists and practiced that lifestyle in India for the first few centuries. Initially, they were concentrated in the Punjab and northwest India before gradually moving down and settling in the regions fed by the Ganges and Yamuna rivers. Tribes could settle into semi-permanent villages, while others spent all or most of their time living nomadically. These tribes engaged in trade, diplomacy, raiding, and warfare with one another, which aligned with their shared warrior culture. 2 of the most important tribes were the Purus and Bharatas. The arrival of ironworking to India after 1200 BC enabled the Vedic peoples to tame the thick forests and jungles that dominated much of the continent and encouraged them to make more permanent settlements. This led the Vedic people to gradually abandon their nomadic lifestyle for more permanent settlement in small agricultural communities, although nothing so large that it could be called a city. As Vedic society developed, its social structure changed too. Initially, the primary social division in Vedic India was between warriors and non-warriors, but in time a new social structure emerged dubbed Varna, also known as the caste system. The Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda describes the Varna system in terms of the body. At the top, representing the head, there are the Brahmins. The Brahmins are the priestly class of India responsible for studying, understanding, and educating on religious texts. All classes owed them reverence and respect, and kings throughout Indian history were expected to patronize and care for them. Below them, representing the hands and arms, were the Kshatriyas. The Kshatriya class is usually translated as warriors, and that's fairly accurate. The Kshatriya class also included kings, nobles, and even administrators, essentially anyone who ruled or exercised power over others, showing the close ties between violence and authority that underpinned most societies in this period. For the thighs, we have the third Varna, Vaishya. Vaishya are mostly farmers, animal husbandmen, merchants, and businessmen. More specifically, it referred to land-owning farmers rather than just anyone who worked in the fields. And pretty much anyone who might employ another person to work for them could be a Vaishya. Which brings us to the feet of the Varna system as described in the Purusha Sukta. The Shudra. Shudra is generally translated as laborer or sometimes peasant and referred to most people in society. These people tilled the soil owned by the Vaishya, crafted the weapons wielded by the Kshatriya, or swept the floors walked by the Brahmins. Overall, their job was to serve the other 3 Varna. Further south, the Deccan Plateau